The choosing ceremony was supposed to be a formality. Seraphine pressed herself against the cold stone pillar at the edge of the great hall, trying to make herself invisible among the other Omegas who had been summoned to witness the ritual. She had no business being this close to the dais where the Alpha King sat, but the crowd had pushed her forward, and now retreating would draw more attention than staying still. The hall of the Silver Throne was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Banners bearing the crest of the Valdrin pack hung from vaulted ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Hundreds of wolves from the kingdom's most powerful bloodlines filled the marble floor, their whispers creating a hum that vibrated through Seraphine's chest. But all eyes were fixed on the three small figures standing at the center of the hall. The royal pups. Seraphine had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. 3 years ago, the Luna Queen had died giving birth to triplets, and the Alpha King had sealed his heart like a tomb. The pups, now barely past their 3rd winter, had refused to bond with anyone since. Nursemaids, governesses, even the king's own sister had tried and failed. The children would not speak, would not play, and would not let anyone touch them. "They say their wolves are broken," whispered a woman near Seraphine. "Born wrong, cursed maybe." Seraphine's fingers curled into fists at her sides. She couldn't see the pups clearly from this distance, but she could feel something. A pull in her chest, like a thread being tugged by an invisible hand. "The choosing will determine their caretaker," announced the king's advisor, a silver-haired beta named Lord Corvinus. His voice echoed through the hall with practiced authority. "The pups will select from among the candidates presented by the noble houses." One by one, highborn women stepped forward, daughters of alphas, sisters of generals, cousins of the king himself. Each one knelt before the pups with rehearsed grace, extending their hands in offering. The pups did not move. The first candidate, a striking alpha woman in crimson silk, waited for nearly a full minute before rising with barely concealed humiliation. The second fared no better, nor the third. By the 7th rejection, the crowd's whispers had turned sharp with confusion and scandal. "This is unprecedented," someone hissed. Seraphine should have looked away, should have remembered her place, but that strange pull in her chest had grown stronger with each rejection, and now it was almost unbearable, a hook behind her ribs, dragging her attention toward those 3 small silhouettes. And then, without warning, the smallest pup turned, not toward the candidates, not toward the king, toward Seraphine. Golden eyes, luminous and knowing in a face still round with baby fat, locked onto hers across the crowded hall. Seraphine's breath stopped. The world narrowed to that single point of connection, and for one impossible moment, she felt something brush against her consciousness. Something warm and desperate, and achingly lonely. "Found you." The thought wasn't hers. It couldn't be hers. The pup took one step forward, then another. Her siblings followed, moving in perfect unison, as if drawn by the same invisible thread that Seraphine felt wrapped around her heart. "What are they doing?" Lord Corvinus demanded. The crowd parted like water before the pup's advance. Seraphine couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand frozen as 3 small figures crossed the vast marble floor toward her. The whispers became gasps. The gasps became shouts. "Is that an Omega? Impossible. The pups would never." Someone stopped them, but no one did. No one could. The pups moved with a certainty that silenced all protest. And when they finally reached Seraphine, the smallest one, the girl who had turned first, lifted her arms in the universal gesture of a child wanting to be held. Seraphine's hands trembled as she looked down at those golden eyes. Eyes that held no trace of the brokenness everyone spoke of. Only recognition, only relief, only home. Before Seraphine could respond, before she could even process what was happening, the pup spoke. "Mine." The word rang through the silent hall like a bell. Then the other 2 joined their sister, small hands reaching for Seraphine's skirts, small voices rising in chorus. "Mine. Ours. Stay." The crowd erupted. Guards rushed forward. Noble women shrieked their outrage. But through it all, Seraphine heard only one sound that mattered. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, descending from the dais. She looked up and her heart stopped entirely. The Alpha King was walking toward her. Kalen Valdrin was everything the stories promised and nothing they could capture. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his broad shoulders blocking out the torchlight behind him. His face was carved from granite, all sharp angles and cold beauty, with eyes the color of a winter storm. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. He stopped 3 paces away, close enough that Seraphine could feel the weight of his power pressing against her like a physical force. The pups had wrapped themselves around her legs, clinging to her as if she were a lifeline in a storm. Their small bodies trembled, but not with fear, with defiance. "You!" The king's voice was deep and cold, a blade wrapped in velvet. "What have you done to my children?" Seraphine opened her mouth to answer, to protest, to explain that she had done nothing, that she didn't understand this any more than he did. But before she could speak, the smallest pup, the girl, turned to face her father with that luminous golden gaze. "She didn't do anything, Papa." The child's voice was clear and strong, the first words anyone outside the nursery had heard her speak in 18 months. Her soul called to us, and we answered. The king's expression flickered. Just for a moment, something cracked in that granite facade, something raw and wounded and desperate. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. "Take her to the East Tower," he commanded. "She doesn't leave until I have answers." The East Tower was cold. Seraphine sat on the Phi's narrow bed, her arms wrapped around her knees, watching moonlight creep across the stone floor. 3 hours had passed since the guards had escorted her here. 3 hours of silence, broken only by the distant howl of wind against ancient walls. She should be terrified. An Omega imprisoned by the Alpha King, accused of bewitching the royal pups. The punishment for such a crime was death, or worse, but terror wasn't what filled her chest. Instead, she felt strangely calm, as if the storm she'd been bracing for her entire life had finally arrived, and there was a strange peace in no longer waiting. "Found you." The memory of that small voice in her mind made her shiver, not with fear, but with something she couldn't name, something that felt dangerously close to hope. A knock at the door made her flinch. Before she could respond, it swung open to reveal a woman in healer's robes, her silver hair pulled back in a severe braid. Behind her stood 2 guards, their expressions carefully blank. "I am Mirabelle," the woman said, stepping inside. "The king's physician. I've been sent to examine you." "Examine me for what?" "Witchcraft, dark magic, anything that might explain what happened in the Great Hall." Miravelle's tone was clinical, but her eyes held something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or pity. Seraphine forced herself to stand, though her legs felt unsteady. "I didn't bewitch anyone. I don't even know how I would. I'm just an Omega." "Yes," Mirabelle circled her, slowly, studying her as if she were a specimen in a jar. "Born to the Ashford pack, sold to the Valdrin household as a scullery servant at age 12. No family, no status, no documented magical abilities." Seraphine flinched at the summary of her life, so stark and small when spoken aloud. "And yet," Mirabelle continued, 3 children who haven't spoken to anyone in 18 months crossed an entire hall to claim you as theirs. Children whose wolves have been sealed since birth suddenly awakened in your presence." She stopped in front of Seraphine, her gaze sharp. "You understand why the king finds this concerning? Their wolves awakened. You didn't know?" Miravelle's eyebrow arched. "When the pups touched you, their wolves stirred for the first time since they were born. The king felt it through the pack bond. Everyone in that hall felt it." Seraphine's hand moved, instinctively to her chest, pressing against the place where she'd felt that strange tug. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm nothing." "Clearly," Mirabelle said, "you are something. The question is what?" The examination that followed was thorough and humiliating. Mirabelle checked her pulse, her pupils, and her reflexes. She pricked Seraphine's finger and studied the blood, muttering about iron content and magical signatures. She made Seraphine recite her lineage, her birth date, and every detail of her unremarkable life. Finally, after what felt like hours, Mirabelle stepped back with a frown. "Nothing," she said. "No dark magic, no enchantments, no explanation." "Then you'll tell the king I'm innocent?" Miravelle's laugh was bitter. "I'll tell him what I found. But innocence and guilt have little to do with what happens next. Those children chose you, girl. Whether you wanted it or not, you're bound to them now, and the king will never let you leave." The words settled into Seraphine's bones like ice. Never let you leave. After Mirabelle departed, Seraphine stood at the narrow window, staring out at the vast forest that surrounded the Valdrin stronghold. Somewhere beyond those trees lay the village where she'd been born, the pack that had discarded her like unwanted baggage. She'd spent her whole life trying to be invisible, keeping her head down, doing her work, never hoping for more than she was given. And now, through no choice of her own, she'd been thrust into the center of a storm she couldn't control. The door opened again. This time, there were no guards, no healer, just the Alpha King himself. Kaelin Valdrin filled the doorway, his presence so overwhelming that Seraphine stumbled backward until her shoulders hit the wall. In the flickering torchlight, he looked less like a king and more like a predator, all coiled power and barely contained violence. "Leave us," he said without turning his head. The guards outside snapped the door shut. They were alone. Seraphine's wolf, suppressed for so long she'd almost forgotten she had one, suddenly surged to life inside her, not with fear, but with something else entirely. Recognition. The same pull she'd felt in the Great Hall, the same invisible thread, but stronger now. So strong it nearly buckled her knees. Mate. No, that was impossible. Alphas didn't mate with Omegas. Kings didn't mate with servants. This was madness, a cruel trick of her desperate mind. But the king had frozen mid-step, his storm-gray eyes widening with shock. His nostrils flared, chest heaving as if he'd been running for miles. "No," he growled. The word was savage, torn from somewhere deep in his chest. "No, this cannot be." Seraphine pressed herself harder against the wall. "What's happening? What? Be silent." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His hand shot out, gripping her chin with bruising force, tilting, her face up toward his. Those gray eyes searched hers, and Seraphine saw something there that terrified her more than his anger. Hunger. "This is impossible," he breathed. "My mate is dead. My Luna is dead. I cannot." His jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. "What are you?" "I don't know," Seraphine whispered. "I don't know what's happening. I don't know why your children came to me. I don't know why. Why my soul is screaming your name." She didn't say the words aloud, but something in his expression shifted as if he'd heard them anyway. His grip on her chin gentled, thumb, brushing across her jaw in a caress so soft it made her gasp. For one impossible moment, his forehead dropped toward hers, their breath mingling in the space between. Then he wrenched himself away with a snarl. "You will stay in this tower," he commanded, already striding toward the door. "You will speak to no one. You will not attempt to contact my children, and you will never speak of what just happened between us." What did happen between us? He paused at the threshold, his back a wall of rigid muscle. "A mistake," he said without turning. "One that will never be repeated." The door slammed shut behind him, and Seraphine slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold floor, her heart pounding so hard she could taste copper. Her wolf was howling inside her, and somewhere, distantly, she could have sworn she heard 3 small voices crying out in response. 3 days passed in the tower. Seraphine measured time by the movement of sunlight across the stones, by the meals that appeared through a slot in the door, by the aching silence that pressed in from all sides. She saw no one, spoke to no one. The king's order had been absolute, but she was not truly alone. Since that night, since the moment Kaelin Valdrin had gripped her chin and looked at her with those hunger-dark eyes, something had awakened inside her. Her wolf, so long suppressed she'd believed it dead, now paced restlessly beneath her skin. She could feel them, the pups, not their physical presence, but something deeper. Emotions that weren't hers bleeding through some invisible connection. Confusion, loneliness, desperate longing, and beneath it all, fainter but growing stronger each day, she felt him, Kaelin. It was like standing near a fire in another room. She couldn't see the flames, but she felt the warmth seeping through the walls. His presence was a constant hum at the edge of her consciousness. On the 3rd night, she woke to the sound of the door opening. Seraphine bolted upright, heart hammering. The room was dark, the torches having burned low hours ago. But her newly awakened senses caught movement in the shadows. Small movement. 3 small figures slipped through the doorway, moving with the silent grace of wolves despite their tiny forms. The door closed behind them with barely a whisper. "You came," the smallest one said. The girl, the one who had spoken first in the Great Hall. Seraphine's breath caught. "I didn't come anywhere. I've been locked in this tower for 3 days. Not your body." The girl climbed onto the bed with startling confidence, her siblings following close behind. "Your soul. It came to find us. Every night, while you sleep." A chill ran down Seraphine's spine. The dreams. She'd been having strange dreams since that first night. Dreams of running through moonlit forests, of playing with 3 small wolf pups who looked up at her with golden eyes. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Lots of things aren't possible," said one of the boys, settling against her side with a contented sigh. Papa says we're impossible too. How did you get past the guards? We're good at not being seen, the third pup said. His voice was quieter than his siblings, more cautious. We've been practicing since Mama died. It's the only way to be safe. Seraphine's heart cracked at the matter-of-fact way he said it. 3 years old, and already learning to survive by becoming invisible. She knew that lesson all too well. You shouldn't be here, she said gently. Your father will be angry. Papa is always angry, the girl replied. She had crawled into Seraphine's lap, small fingers clutching the rough fabric of her servant's dress. He's been angry since Mama went to sleep and didn't wake up. But when we're near you, we can feel something different. Something warm. What's your name? Seraphine asked, suddenly desperate to know. Lysera. The girl pressed her cheek against Seraphine's chest, right over her heart. My brothers are Fenwick and Calder, and you're Seraphine. We heard your soul tell us. Tears pricked at Seraphine's eyes. She shouldn't encourage this, shouldn't let herself get attached to children who could never be hers. The king had made that clear, but when Lysera's small arms wrapped around her waist, when Fenwick and Calder pressed close on either side, something inside Seraphine broke and reformed in a new shape. Just for tonight, she murmured, gathering them closer. Just until you fall asleep. Then you have to go back to your beds. Do you understand? 3 small heads nodded against her. Within minutes, their breathing had slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep. Seraphine sat motionless in the darkness. 3 royal pups curled around her like she was. Something precious, something worth protecting. Her wolf had finally stopped pacing, settling into a deep contentment she'd never felt before. This is where we belong, her wolf whispered. This is what we were made for. Dangerous thoughts, impossible thoughts. But as the hours slipped past and the pups slept peacefully in her arms for the first time in their young lives, Seraphine couldn't bring herself to push them away. She was still holding them when the door burst open at dawn. The king stood in the doorway, flanked by guards, his face a mask of cold fury. But beneath the anger, Seraphine saw something else flicker through the mate bond she was learning to read. Terror. He was terrified. Step away from my children, he commanded. Lysera stirred, blinking awake. When she saw her father, she didn't cower or cry. Instead, she tightened her grip on Seraphine's dress and fixed her father with those fierce golden eyes. No. The single word hung in the air like a declaration of war. Lysera. The king's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. You will return to the nursery. Now. She's ours, Papa. Lysera's voice was steady, far too steady for a child of 3. Her soul matches ours. Can't you feel it? Seraphine watched the king's expression shatter and reform, watched him fight a battle inside himself that she could feel echoing through the bond. His wolf was howling, she realized. Howling for her, howling for the mate it recognized even as the man tried to deny. I feel nothing, he said, but the words were hollow. Liar. Lysera's accusation was gentle, almost pitying. You feel everything, Papa. That's why you hide in your study. That's why you won't look at us. Because looking at us reminds you of Mama, and feeling things hurts too much. The king flinched as if he'd been struck. But Seraphine doesn't hurt, Lysera continued. She makes the hurting stop. Please, Papa. Please let us keep her. Silence stretched through the room, thick and trembling. Seraphine couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She was caught between the children clinging to her and the king staring at her with eyes full of a pain so profound it made her want to weep. Finally, Kaelin Valdrin spoke. Bring her to my study, he said to the guards. The children will return to the nursery. He paused at the threshold, not looking back. And someone find out how 3 toddlers bypassed an entire squadron of royal guards without being detected. He was gone before Seraphine could respond. But through the bond, she felt something shift. A door cracking open, just slightly, in the fortress around his heart. The king's study was a monument to control. Every book, perfectly aligned on every shelf. Every document stacked in precise piles. Every candle burning at exactly the same height. It was the room of a man desperately trying to impose order on a world that had shattered around him. Seraphine stood in the center of it, acutely aware of how out of place she was. Her dress was wrinkled from 3 days in the tower. Her hair hung in tangled waves around her shoulders. She looked like exactly what she was, a servant who had stumbled into places she didn't belong. The king sat behind his massive oak desk, studying her with an expression that revealed nothing. The morning light streaming through the windows caught the scar on his face, making it gleam like a silver river cutting through stone. Sit. He gestured to a chair across from him. Seraphine sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. Miravel tells me you have no magical cant. Abilities, he began. No witch blood in your lineage. No explanation for what happened in the Great Hall. No, Your Majesty. And yet my children, who have refused to speak to anyone for 18 months, crawled into your lap and slept through the night without a single nightmare. His jaw tightened. They have nightmares every night. Did you know that? They wake screaming for their mother. The healers say it's because their wolves never properly bonded with anyone after she died. They say the pups might never recover. Seraphine's heart clenched. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Last night was the first time they slept peacefully since the day they were born. The king's voice cracked, just slightly, before he mastered it. What did you do to them? Nothing, Seraphine insisted. They came to me. They climbed into my arms. They fell asleep. I just held them. You just held them. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. As if that explains anything. I can't explain what I don't understand. The king rose abruptly, turning to face the window. Seraphine could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid line of his spine. Through the bond, she felt his emotions churning, confusion, anger, grief, and beneath it all, a desperate, terrifying hope that he was trying to crush before it could take root. Do you know why my mate died? He asked quietly. Seraphine shook her head, then realized he couldn't see her. No, Your Majesty. She was too gentle for this world, too pure. His voice had gone soft, almost reverent. Isadora couldn't bear to see anything suffer. She used to sneak food to the servants' quarters. Did you know that? She thought I didn't notice. She used to heal wounded animals in the forest, bring them home, and nurse them back to health. He turned to face Seraphine, and she saw tears glistening in his gray eyes. When the triplets came, her body couldn't survive the birth. The healers said it was because she'd given too much of herself to everyone else. There was nothing left for her. His voice broke entirely. She died with my name on her lips, begging me to take care of our children. And I have failed her. I have failed them every single day since. Seraphine's own tears spilled over. She didn't try to stop them. You haven't failed them, she said softly. You're still here. You're still trying. That's more than many would do. What would you know about it? The words were harsh, but his expression wasn't. He looked at her like a drowning man looks at a distant shore. I know about loss, Seraphine said. My parents sold me to pay their debts when I was 12. I know about being alone in a world that doesn't want you. I know about building walls so high that no one can hurt you again. She rose from her chair, drawn by something stronger than fear, stronger than propriety. Through the bond, she felt his wolf rising to meet hers, felt the connection between them thrumming like a plucked string. I know, she continued, stepping closer. What it feels like to believe you deserve the pain. To punish yourself for surviving when someone you loved didn't. She was standing before him now, close enough to touch, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat, to smell the cedar and pine of his scent. But your children are still here, she whispered. They're still alive, and they're reaching out for someone to love them. Isn't that worth more than grief? Isn't that worth fighting for? The king's composure finally shattered. A sound escaped him, something between a growl and a sob. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with desperate strength, pulling her against his chest. I feel you, he rasped against her hair. Every moment of every day, I feel you in my blood, in my bones, in the parts of my soul I thought were dead. My wolf screams for you. My children cry for you. And he pulled back just enough to look at her, his expression raw and wrecked. I swore I would never take another mate. I swore on Isadora's grave that my heart died with her. But you, his voice cracked. What are you doing to me? Nothing you aren't doing to me, Seraphine admitted, her own voice trembling. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. But I feel it too. I feel all of it. For a long moment, they simply stood there, bound together by something neither of them could explain. Then the door burst open. Lord Corvinus stood in the entrance, his face ashen, with urgency. Your Majesty, there's been an attack on the eastern border. The Nightshade Pack has crossed into our territory. The king released Seraphine instantly, his entire demeanor shifting from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. Casualties? 3 villages burned, dozens dead. And your Majesty, Corvinus hesitated. They're demanding the Omega. They say she belongs to them. Seraphine felt the blood drain from her face. What? The king's expression went cold as death. They will not have her, he growled. Summon the war council, double the guard on the nursery, and Corvinus. He paused, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "Prepare a message for the Nightshade Alpha. Tell him that if he comes for what is mine, I will tear his heart from his chest and feed it to my wolves." He turned to Seraphine, and in his gaze she saw a possessiveness that should have terrified her. Instead, it made her wolf howl with fierce satisfaction. "You will not leave my sight until this threat is eliminated," he commanded. "Whatever you are, whoever sent you, you are under my protection now." "I'm no one," Seraphine insisted. "No one is looking for me. I don't understand. Neither do I." The king's hand cupped her cheek, rough and tender at once. "But I intend to find out. And God's help anyone who tries to take you from me before I do." He swept from the room, already barking orders to the gathering guards. Seraphine stood alone in the study, her cheek still burning from his touch, her mind reeling with questions. Who was the Nightshade Pack? Why did they want her? And what dark secret was buried in her past that she didn't even know existed? The War Council chamber smelled of iron and old blood. Seraphine stood in the shadows near the netter door, trying to make herself small as the most powerful wolves in the Valdrin Kingdom argued around a massive oak table. Maps covered every surface, marked with red lines showing the Nightshade Pack's advance. She shouldn't be here. The king had commanded her presence, but every alpha in the room had made their displeasure clear with cold stares and barely concealed snarls. "The Omega should be surrendered," growled General Theron, a scarred warrior whose silver hair spoke of decades of battle. "If the Nightshade Pack wants her badly enough to declare war, she must have value to them. We lose nothing by giving her up." Seraphine's blood turned to ice. "We lose honor," the king said flatly. "She is under my protection. With respect, your majesty, she is a servant, a nobody. 3 villages have already burned because of her. How many more will die while we protect a woman whose only worth is scrubbing floors?" A low growl rumbled through the chamber. It took Seraphine a moment to realize it came from the king. "Choose your next words carefully, General." Theron's jaw tightened, but he pressed on. "The pack must come first. It has always come first. Your father would have—" "My father is dead." The king's voice cut like a blade. "And I am not him. The Omega stays." Lord Corvinus cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should focus on why the Nightshade Pack wants her. Our scouts report that their alpha, Malvrek, has been searching for something for years. Something he calls the key." "The key to what?" asked another council member. "Unknown, but his obsession began shortly after the Ashford Pack was destroyed." Seraphine's heart stuttered. "Destroyed? The Ashford Pack wasn't destroyed. They sold me to pay their debts. Every eye in the room turned to her. "You weren't told," Corvinus said slowly. "The Ashford Pack was annihilated 15 years ago, 6 months after you were sold to us. Every man, woman, and child slaughtered in a single night." The room tilted. Seraphine gripped the wall to keep from falling. "That's not possible. My parents, dead. Along with everyone who might have known why Malvrek wanted you." Corvinus's expression was unreadable. "You were the only survivor, sold away before the attack, almost as if someone knew what was coming. Are you suggesting my parents sold me to save my life?" "I'm suggesting," Corvinus said carefully, "that there is something about you, something in your blood or your past that is worth destroying an entire pack to obtain. And until we know what that is, you are both our greatest vulnerability and potentially our greatest weapon." The king stood abruptly, his chair scraping against stone. "This council is adjourned. Corvinus, find out everything you can about the Ashford Pack's history. General Theron, reinforce the eastern border, and someone bring Miravel to my chambers." He strode toward Seraphine, his expression unreadable. "Come with me." She followed without question, her mind still reeling from Corvinus's revelation. Her parents hadn't abandoned her. They had saved her, and they had died for it. The king led her through winding corridors until they reached a part of the castle she'd never seen. The stones here were older, darker, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. "Where are we?" "The old wing. This is where the first Valdrin alphas kept their secrets." He stopped before a heavy iron door. The door groaned open to reveal a chamber filled with ancient texts and artifacts. At the center stood a pedestal bearing a book bound in leather so old it had turned nearly black. "The Chronicle of Blood," the king said. "The history of every pack in the Northern Territories, going back 1,000 years. He turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't expected. "Fear. I need to Tignet. Know what you are. My wolf has claimed you as mate. My children's wolves have bonded to you in ways that shouldn't be possible. And now an enemy pack is willing to start a war to possess you." He stepped closer, I need to know if you are my salvation or my destruction." Before Seraphine could respond, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside, shouting, running footsteps, then a scream that turned her blood to ice. "Lysara." The king moved faster than Seraphine's eyes could track, but she was only steps behind him as he tore through the castle toward the nursery. Guards lay unconscious. In the hallways, the air reeked of wolfsbane and dark magic. They burst through the nursery doors to find chaos. 3 figures in black cloaks surrounded the pups, who had shifted into their wolf forms for the first time. Tiny silver pups, barely larger than house cats, snarling with a ferocity that belied their size. But they were no match for the intruders. One of the cloaked figures raised a hand, dark energy crackling between his fingers. "The mother calls for her children. Come quietly, little ones, and no one else needs to die." "Get away from them!" Seraphine screamed. Something exploded inside her. Not her wolf. Something older. Something that had been sleeping in her blood since the day she was born, waiting for this moment to awaken. Golden light erupted from her palms, slamming into the cloaked figures with the force of a thunderbolt. They flew backward, crashing, through walls, their dark magic dissolving like mist in sunlight. Seraphine stood trembling, staring at her hands as the light slowly faded. She could feel power thrumming through her veins, ancient and terrible and utterly unknown. The pups shifted back to human form and ran to her, wrapping themselves around her legs. She gathered them up automatically, her body still shaking with the aftershock of whatever she had just done. "Mama," Lysara whispered against her neck. "You came. You saved us." The word hit Seraphine like a physical blow. "Mama." She looked up to find the king staring at her with an expression mixing shock, awe, and something that looked terrifyingly like reverence. "Now I understand," he breathed. "Now I understand why they want you." "What am I?" Seraphine demanded, her voice cracking. "What did I just do?" "You're a luminary," he said. "A bearer of the old light." They were supposed to be extinct, hunted to annihilation centuries ago because their power could destroy or create entire bloodlines. He stepped closer, his voice hushed with wonder. "You're not just a mate, Seraphine. You're the key to everything." The revelation changed everything. In the days that followed, Seraphine was no longer treated as a prisoner or a curiosity. She was moved to chambers, adjoining the royal suite. Guards were posted at her door not to keep her in, but to keep threats out. But the most profound change was in the pups. Since the attack, they refused to leave her side. They slept in her bed, ate at her table, and followed her everywhere like 3 small shadows. And Seraphine, despite every warning in her mind, let them. She was falling in love with them. It was that simple and that terrifying. Lysara, fierce and wise beyond her years, who looked at Seraphine as if she held the answers to every question in the universe. Fenwick, gentle and thoughtful, who spent hours drawing pictures of wolves and flowers and presenting them to her like treasures. Calder, quiet and watchful, who rarely spoke but whose hand always found hers when he was frightened. They called her Mama now, all 3 of them, and every time they said it, another piece of Seraphine's carefully constructed walls crumbled to dust. But the king kept his distance. Oh, she felt him through the bond. Every moment of every day, his presence hummed at the edge of her consciousness. She felt his longing, his conflict, his desperate attempt to resist the pull between them. At night, when the pups were asleep, she sensed him pacing in his chambers, his wolf howling for release. But he didn't come to her. On the 5th night, Seraphine couldn't bear it anymore. She waited until the pups were deeply asleep, then slipped from her chambers and made her way through the darkened corridors to the king's study. The guards let her pass without question. Another change she hadn't expected. She found him standing at the window, staring out at the moonlit forest. He didn't turn when she entered, but she felt his awareness of her spike through the bond. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" Seraphine asked finally. "I feel what you feel, Kaelin. I know. What your wolf wants. What you want. Why do you fight it so hard?" He turned then, and she saw the rawness in his expression. "Because wanting you feels like betraying her. Isadora. She was my heart," he said, his voice breaking. "She was everything good in me. When she died, I swore I would never love again. I swore her memory would be enough." Seraphine moved closer, drawn by his pain. "And is it? Is her memory enough?" "It was," he laughed bitterly. Until your soul called to my children, and woke something in them I thought was lost forever. Until your light destroyed. Enemies that would have taken everything I have left. His eyes found hers. Until I realized that my heart didn't die with Isadora. It was just waiting. Waiting for you. Then why push me away? Because I'm terrified. The admission seemed to cost him everything. I'm terrified that if I let myself love you, I'll lose you too. And I won't survive it again, Seraphine. Losing her nearly destroyed me. Losing you would finish the job. Seraphine reached up, cupping his scarred cheek in her palm. She felt him shudder at the contact, felt his wolf surge toward her through the bond. I can't. Promise I won't die, she said softly. No one can promise that. But I can promise that every moment I'm alive, I will spend loving your children as if they were my own. I can promise that I will stand beside you against whatever comes. And I can promise that whatever this is between us, I won't run from it. Kaelin's control finally snapped. He kissed her like a drowning man, gasping for air. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her against him with desperate strength. She felt his wolf merging with hers, felt the mate bond blazing to full, brilliant life between them. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, his forehead rested against hers. Mine, he growled, the word ancient and absolute. Yours, she answered. A small voice interrupted from the doorway. Does this mean Seraphine is our real mama now? They turned to find Lysara standing in her nightgown, Fenwick and Calder hovering behind her. 3 pairs of golden eyes watched them with a mixture of hope and fear. Kaelin looked at Seraphine. Seraphine looked at the pups. Come here, she said, opening her arms. They flew to her, crashing into her embrace with the force of 3 small hurricanes. She gathered them close, breathing in their scent, feeling their wolves purring with contentment through the bond. Kaelin wrapped his arms around all of them, his family, his pack, his heart finally made whole. Yes, he told his children, his voice rough with emotion. She's your real mama now. Forever. For one perfect moment, everything was right. Then the castle bells began to toll. Lord Corvinus burst through the door, his face white with terror. Your Majesty, the Nightshade Pack. They're here. All of them. He paused, struggling to catch his breath. And they've brought an army. The battle came. At dawn, from the castle walls, Seraphine watched the enemy army spread across the valley like a dark tide. Thousands of wolves in their beast forms, their howls creating a sound that shook the very stones beneath her feet. At their head stood a figure that made her blood freeze. Alpha Malvrek of the Nightshade Pack was a monster. Even in human form, he stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body twisted and scarred by dark rituals. His eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, and when he smiled up at the castle walls, Seraphine saw fangs that belonged to no natural wolf. Give me the luminary. His voice boomed, amplified by magic. Give her to me, and your pack will be spared. Resist, and I will slaughter every man, woman, and child in this castle, starting with the pups. Beside her, Kaelin growled low in his throat. Stay with the children. No matter what happens, protect them. I'm not hiding while you fight my battles. This isn't your battle. The moment you claimed me, your battles became mine. She gripped his arm, forcing him to meet her eyes. I have power, Kaelin. Power I don't understand yet, but I won't learn to use it by cowering in a tower while people die for me. His jaw clenched, but she felt his resistance crumbling through the bond. If anything happens to you, then you'll raise our children to remember my name. She rose on her toes, pressing a fierce kiss to his lips. Now go. Lead your army. I'll be right behind you. The battle was chaos. Seraphine stayed with the rear guard at first, watching as Kaelin led the charge in his massive wolf form. He was magnificent and terrifying, silver-black fur rippling as he tore through enemy wolves. The Valdrin warriors fought with desperate courage, but they were outnumbered 3-1. And then Malvrek entered the fray. He moved like nothing Seraphine had ever seen, dark magic crackling around him as he carved a path toward the castle gates. Even the strongest alpha warriors couldn't stand against him. He was heading for the nursery. For the pups, Seraphine felt the realization hit her like a thunderbolt. This entire attack, the army, the ultimatum, it was all a distraction. Malvrek didn't want to fight the Valdrin pack. He wanted the children, because the children were bonded to her, because through them, he could control her power. She ran, through corridors filled with smoke and screaming, past wounded warriors and terrified servants. She ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. The power inside her was building again, responding to her fear, her desperation, her overwhelming need to protect. She burst into the nursery to find Malvrek already there. He had the pups cornered against the far wall, their small wolf forms snarling with defiant terror. Miravel lay unconscious near the door, blood seeping from a wound on her temple. The guards were dead. "There you are," Malvrek purred. "I've been waiting a long time for this moment. Get away from them." "Or what?" He laughed, the sound like breaking bones. "You don't even know what you are, little luminary. You don't know how to use your power, but I do. I've spent decades studying your kind, hunting them, harvesting their light." He stepped closer, and she saw that his red eyes held a hunger that went beyond desire. "Your parents tried to hide you. They scattered the Ashford pack to the winds, erased every record of your birth, sold you to the farthest pack they could find. They thought they'd saved you." His smile widened. "They were wrong. My parents loved me. Your parents feared you, as they should have." He raised his hand, dark energy swirling. "Now come quietly, and I'll let the pups live. Resist, and I'll make you watch as I tear them apart." Behind Malvrek, Seraphine saw Lysara's eyes meet hers. Those brave golden eyes, so full of trust and love and fierce determination. "We believe in you, Mama. Do what you were born to do." The words echoed through the bond, carrying with them the strength of 3 small souls who had chosen her above all others. Seraphine stopped running. She stopped hiding. She stopped being afraid of what she was. The power erupted from her like a supernova, not just light this time, but something more. Something that reached into the very fabric of existence and rewrote it. She felt herself expanding, becoming something vast and terrible and beautiful. She felt the bonds connecting her to the pups, to Kaelin, to every wolf in the Valdrin, pack blazing with golden fire. Malvrek screamed as her light touched him, his dark magic dissolving like shadows at noon. His twisted form began to crack, the unnatural power that had sustained him for decades burning away under the force of her awakening. "What are you?" he howled. "I am there, Mother," Seraphine said, and her voice carried echoes of every luminary who had come before, every bearer of the old light who had loved fiercely enough to reshape the world. "I am their pack, I am their heart, and you will never touch them again." She reached out with her power and unmade him. It wasn't violent. It wasn't cruel. She simply looked at the darkness inside him and chose to replace it with light. Malvrek's scream faded to silence as centuries of hatred and corruption dissolved, leaving nothing behind but ash. The pups rushed to her, shifting back to human form, throwing themselves into her arms. She caught them automatically, though her body was trembling with the aftermath of power. "Mama," Lysara sobbed. "Mama, you did it." "I did," Seraphine whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We did." Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Kaelin burst through the door in, human form, covered in blood and dirt, his eyes wild with terror. "Seraphine." She looked up at him, her mate, her king, the other half of her soul. "I'm here," she said. "We're all here." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling all of them into his arms. She felt his relief crashing through, the bond, felt his wolf howling with joy and triumph, and a love so profound it made her dizzy. "The Nightshade army is retreating," he said against her hair. When Malvrek fell, their wolves lost the dark compulsion driving them. Half of them surrendered immediately. "It's over? It's over." He pulled back to look at her, wonder in his eyes. "You saved us. You saved everyone. I couldn't have done it without them." She looked down at the pups nestled against her, at the 3 small souls who had crossed a crowded hall to claim her as theirs. "They believed in me when I couldn't believe. In myself. They showed me what I was fighting for." Kaelin's hand cupped her cheek, turning her face to his. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it before. I should have said it every moment since you walked into that hall and turned my world upside down. I love you, Seraphine, my mate, my Luna, my heart. I love you too." She smiled through her tears. "My alpha, my king, my home." When he kissed her, she felt their bond complete itself at last. Not just the wolf bond, not just the mate bond, but something deeper. The bond of 2 souls who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other despite every obstacle, who had built a family from the ashes of grief and loneliness. The pups cheered, their small voices rising in celebration, and somewhere deep inside Seraphine, in the place where her light lived, she felt the echo of her parents' love. They had sent her, away to save her life. They had died so she could live. And now, at last, she understood why. Not just so she could survive, so she could become this. A mother, a mate, a Luna, a light in the darkness. Home. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story of Seraphine and Kaelin and their 3 precious pups. If you'd like to listen on the go, all my stories are also available on Spotify. You'll find the link in the description below. A big thank you to everyone who's following. Your support truly means the world to me. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me what you'd like to hear next. Until next time, may you find your own pack, your own home, and your own happily ever after.